Yo, we step up in the scene, check your engine is clean. DPF guys got your ride smoking green. No block, no drag, just pure machine. Come show us your truck, we'll make it pristine. We just wanna know, can your diesel uphold? Bring something dirty, we'll turn it to gold. It's like this, we clean up your flow. Now your engine is gliding. It's time to hit the road.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button on your YouTube channel, youtube.com/DPF guys, if you're on your web browser, so you don't miss any of our content. If you're catching this someplace other than YouTube, head over to YouTube and join the action. And of course, any place you are, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm James from DPF Guys, your go-to for diesel after-treatment services. Whether you're an owner-operator with one truck, you manage a fleet, or run a repair shop or a truck dealership, we've got the expertise to keep you running, clean, and compliant. We handle everything with the diesel engine, from your light and medium-duty pickup trucks to passenger vehicles and RVs to off-road equipment like tractors, skid steers, and even stationary equipment like generators and wood chippers. Today, we'll be talking about some of the biggest issues truckers face with their emission systems. We're covering why your DPF keeps clogging even after a fresh cleaning, how cold weather can mess with your regen cycles, and the hidden role of your crankcase breather in causing DPF issues. We'll break down the difference between soot and ash, explain why regens don't solve every problems like magic, and even touch on new emissions technology like gasoline particulate filters. Plus, we'll answer real questions from drivers about mystery power loss in cold weather, cracking DPFs, and what to do when your truck keeps throwing codes no matter what you replace. Stick around, drop your questions in the chat, wherever it might be, and let's get into it. If it has a DPF, we've got you covered. Call or text us at 404-999-1361 for more information. Again, call or text 404-999-1361 for more info. Got a question? Drop a comment. I'll answer it live during the session if I don't miss it. Sometimes I do miss them. Don't feel bad about that. I will circle back and grab them later. All right, so question number one. All right, this is a good one. So stopping and doing a burn or a regen in one spot is, in my opinion, worse than spreading all that soot over several miles of road while you're driving. So this is a thoughtful question, and it seems there is often confusion about how a diesel particulate filter or DPF regen process actually works. So let's break it down to clarify what happens during a regeneration and address concerns about emissions, especially this person's concern. Because again, the question kind of says, wouldn't it be better for me to just, let the exhaust just fly into the air no matter where I drive, in the country, city, past daycare centers and everything else, or just go, whatever it might be. So number one, understanding the DPF regeneration process. DPF regen, which is shorthand for regeneration, is the process designed to burn off soot that is accumulated in the DPF. The goal is to convert the solid soot particles into harmless gases, which end up being nitrogen and water vapor. And again, what is nitrogen? It's 78% of the air you breathe is nitrogen. And what is water vapor? It is H2O. Your meat suit is made up about 60% of that. Water is pretty good. I drink it every day. This process happens inside the DPF and is carefully controlled by the truck's after-treatment system. Not just in the DPF, I should clarify. It also uses the SCR to break down NOx and things like that. But when all is said and done, what comes out of your tailpipe is just water vapor and nitrogen. And yes, there is CO2, carbon dioxide, that happens with any sort of combustion, but that's going to come out no matter what happens. So what kind of regens are there? There's two of them. One of them is the passive regen, or the rolling regen. This happens naturally while driving, when the exhaust temperature gets hot enough to burn off soot without driver intervention. The active regen is triggered by the truck's engine control module. When the soot levels get too high, this can happen while driving or when the truck is parked, depending upon conditions. Also, you have a forced regen where they actually hook up a computer to regenerate your truck, but they're all doing the same thing. So the big question is, does a regen dump soot into the air? And the short answer to that is no. No, it doesn't. During a regen, soot is not released into the environment. Instead, it's burned inside the DPF. And what comes out of the exhaust after it's been processed through the entire system is nitrogen and water vapor, not visible soot or smoke. In fact, you shouldn't even be able to smell anything really coming off of your exhaust. So if you're ever seeing black smoke during a regen, that's a sign that something is quite wrong, like a cracked DPF or an issue with the after treatment system. In a properly functioning system, you shouldn't see or smell anything unusual coming from the tailpipe during a regen. I know I hear a lot of people go, it smells like cat piss. Well, then that truck has something wrong with it. You really shouldn't smell anything coming off that exhaust. And another thing is, does it really matter if you regen while driving or parked? In terms of emissions, it doesn't really matter whether the regen happens while you're driving or when the truck is parked. The process is the same. Soot is burned inside the filter, and only clean gases like nitrogen and water vapor are released. The key difference is in engine load and temperature control. So while driving, the truck can maintain consistent exhaust temperatures, which makes the regen more efficient. While parked, the engine relies exclusively on fuel dosing to raise the exhaust temperature, which takes a bit longer but achieves the same result. Regardless of how you do your regen, whether it be passive, active, forced, parked, whatever it might be, none of them spread pollution around because the soot is not leaving the emission system. It's being eliminated. So DPF regens do not release soot into the atmosphere. They do not release soot into the atmosphere, whether it's done driving, parked, active, passive, whatever it is. The process is designed to burn up that soot, and the soot is simply unburned diesel fuel, and to burn it into nitrogen and water vapor, and keeping the emissions completely clean. Now, what if you are seeing smoke during a regen? This is not normal. Now, again, you might see some water vapor, kind of steam, depending upon the temperature and conditions that the truck is in at the moment, but you really shouldn't see anything else. So if you are experiencing issues with regens or have any more questions about how your emissions systems work, give us a call or a text, 404-999-1361. We are here to, we can take your call or text anytime, day or night. Now, you might end up talking to our AI receptionist. Her name is Lynn Diesel. You could call her right now at 404-999-1361. If you want to talk to Lynn Diesel or give us a text, call 404-999-1361. And she's actually waiting for your call right now. So thank you for your question. Number two. What do we have for the number two question here? Is there any way to replace or repair the ceramic on a DOC in a one box for a Freightliner? And actually, the answer to that is yes, absolutely. Up until recently, this wasn't an option, but we can now completely rebuild a Freightliner one box from the ground up, including the DOC, DPFs. Of course, those can be replaced without doing a rebuild on it, and SCR, the selective catalytic reducer. But here's the thing. It's like, why are you asking? The DOC in the one box rarely fails on its own. In fact, I've never seen one fail. So it's helpful to understand what symptoms you're seeing. In many cases, a full rebuild is not necessary. So there's some DOC issues we can fix without doing any sort of rebuild. One of them is if your DOC is soot packed or face plugged. If your DOC is clogged with soot, which would normally happen if there was something going on upstream. In fact, only would happen if something going on upstream. Turbo, injectors, whatever it might be. We can clean it out thoroughly using specialized equipment and processes. And like I just said, this is usually only caused by upstream issues like excessive soot production from engine problems or skipped maintenance. What if your DOC has pushed its way out? If the ceramic substrate is shifted inside the housing, we can often realign and secure it without a full replacement. And what'll happen is when a DOC on a one box does get soot plugged and completely plugged up, it'll act like a cork, and the exhaust pressure, the back will push that out forward, basically like a piston, and it'll go out so far that there's a temperature sensor that's poking in there. It'll even break off the temperature sensor and really cause a ruckus. But we can then relocate those. We can carefully push them back with a hydraulic process that we use, and then fix them in place. Get all of the soot out of that DOC to so that it now breathes better, will not shift again, and hopefully whatever's wrong with that engine they figure out. What about contamination? Oil, coolant, I don't know, boogers, whatever gets in there. So if your DOC has been affected by oil from a failed turbo or coolant from a leaking EGR cooler, we can also clean that contamination out of it and restore proper function. No rebuild required in many of these cases. But then what about the SCR? If the SCR is full of soot due to a failed DPF, a cracked DPF, we can also clean out the SCR thoroughly to restore proper flow and function. And just so you know, a soot contaminated SCR is called a poisoned SCR. We can definitely get that out of there. If the SCR substrate, the catalyst media, is damaged or compromised, we can replace the SCR media entirely as a part of the rebuild process. So when is a full rebuild the right option? If your DOC or SCR is physically damaged, has cracks in the ceramic substrate, or is completely compromised, we're fully equipped to do that. We can replace the DOC, rebuild the entire one-box system, including the DPF, DOC, and SCR, if needed. Ensure that everything meets or exceeds OEM standards, but consider this before you rebuild. One would be cost. A full rebuild can be more expensive than you might think. New versus rebuild. In some cases, you might be better off buying one of our brand new, ready-to-go one-box units. And all of our new one boxes come with a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty, and the price difference between a new and rebuilt unit is often a lot smaller than people think. And with a new unit, you're getting 0 mileage on every component. So if you want to talk more about a rebuild, I'd be happy to discuss that with you. But what's the next step, I guess? Give us a call or a text at 404-999-1361, 404-999-1361. In fact, if you want to give us a call right now and leave a message or text us a message at 404-999-1361, we can get the conversation started. So let's talk about what's going on with your DOC and SCR and figure if a cleaning will solve the problem, or a minor repair will do the trick, or whether you need a full rebuild, or maybe even a new unit, which might be kind of we'd be leaning towards. Let's see what makes most sense for it. So we'll help you make the right call without wasting monies on repairs you don't need. All right, I'm going to quick check something here. We're going to go to question number 3 in a second. Let's see if any questions come in. All right, we got a good one from Brian Schwartz. He joined us on the TikTok live that we did just a few minutes ago, where I was politely encouraging people to join us on YouTube. So he had asked about F550s and not being able to do a kind of a manual regen. And I've noticed that on some of the newer medium duty, light duty trucks, they don't have a regen now button on them, and the expectation is that you would just go out and drive it. So I guess that's what I would recommend. Just if you have a truck that doesn't have a lot of, doesn't go very far, doesn't get hot enough, take that thing out and get it on the highway for 30, 40 minutes and let that thing run through a regen, or take it someplace where they can hook up a computer and run a regen on it. But thanks for your question, Brian. And if anybody else there is watching me, please feel free to leave a question live. And if you leave a question for me after the fact, like once this live is over, don't worry, I will still answer it. Just I can answer it right in the message and then add your question to a future live. And so not only can we answer you, but also answer anybody else who might have that question. shameless promotion here. If you are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, why the heck not? Definitely do that now. Subscribe and like, follow, share, and all that good stuff. All right, moving on. From Matthew Vanderpool from TikTok, do you think older trucks should have DPFs? And that is a great question. And honestly, there's no one size fits all answer. It really comes down to the age of the truck, the technology it was built with, and what you're trying to achieve. Retrofitting DPFs on older trucks doesn't make sense, in my opinion. Again, this is just my opinion. It does not make sense. Trying to retrofit emissions systems on DPFs, like DPFs onto older trucks, in my belief, is an exercise in futility. Older trucks were not designed for any emissions, so adding them often causes far more problems than it solves. You'll likely deal with performance issues, reduced reliability, and constant maintenance headaches, all for very, very little emissions improvement. There were even government grants and programs that push for retrofitting emissions on old trucks in buses and things like that. But in reality, most of those turned out to be boondoggles. The trucks never ran as well after the retrofits. The costs often outweighed the environmental benefits. And let's be honest, it was more about checking boxes than delivering real results. So what's my take on this? If you have an older pre-emissions truck, let it live out its life as it was built. Keep it well maintained, but don't try to force modern emissions systems onto it. But what about the newer trucks? This is a hot button issue that I am on the opposite side of many people who watch my content, but we can still be friends. Newer trucks were designed from the ground up to work with emission systems like your DPF, your DOC, your SCR, and EGR. Deleting emissions on a modern truck will cause more problems than people think. This is a common misconception that deleting emissions will make your truck run better, last longer, be more fuel efficient, but that is simply not the case anymore. And why is that? The entire engine, even the transmission and the aftertreatment system, are designed to work together in harmony. Deleting emissions throws that off, leading to issues like poor fuel economy, believe it or not, engine derates, turbo failures, excessive soot buildup in places you don't want it. And let's not forget, deleting emission systems is simply illegal. If you get caught, the fines can be massive, and even shops that do deletes face serious, very serious risks. So, my recommendation is just don't do it. I know it's kind of a new knee-jerk reaction that anytime a truck sneezes, people want to delete the DPF systems off of it, but it no longer is the magic answer like it used to be. So just, tread lightly. Older pre-emissions trucks, let them be. They were built without emission systems, and trying to retrofit them is not worth the hassle. Newer trucks, keep it intact. They were designed to work with emissions, and deleting emissions causes more harm than good. If you're having issues with your emission system, the answer is not to delete it. It's to diagnose the real problem and fix it the right way. And the real problem is most likely, literally 90+% of the time, if somebody has after treatment issues, DEF issues, DPF issues, the problem is up in the engine and not in the emission system. So do you want to talk to me before you do anything? Give us a call or a text, 404-999-1361. Call or text 404-999-1361. Call anytime. Usually catch us while we're open, typical business hours, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Call us anytime after that. You will talk to Lynn Diesel, our receptionist. She is digital, but still pretty sharp. Or drop us a text at 404-999-1361. Screenshot this baby, 404-999-1361. We'll help you keep your truck running. No gimmicks, no shortcuts, just solid solutions and suggestions that you can choose to follow or ignore. It's up to you. All right, what do we got here? USA Truckin'. What is the average miles per gallon for DEF? On average, most modern diesel trucks consume DEF at a rate of about 2 to 3% of diesel fuel consumption for light duty trucks, and maybe 3 to 5%. I usually tell people 2%. And again, it's going to depend on load and what have you. So for every 100 gallons of diesel you burn, you will use about 2 gallons of DEF. And I guess the number one thing to do is kind of establish what your typical burn rate is for DEF. And if it starts to change, go up, go down dramatically, it may be telling you've got an issue. So what does that mean? That typically means you'll go about 300 miles, maybe up to 500 miles per gallon of DEF in a heavy duty truck, depending upon driving conditions. One thing you can do to reduce your DEF consumption and definitely help out your truck is Clean Air Fleet, right over here. And you can, if you want to know more about Clean Air Fleet and how it can help your truck, text 404-999-1361, text additive to 404-999-1361, and I'll get you 10% off on your first case of 4 gallons. So if you can get your engine to produce less NOx, it will use less DEF, and that's a good thing. Stop and go city driving will burn more DEF than steady highway driving. Ambient temperature. In colder weather, DEF will freeze. The system has to heat it up, which can slightly affect consumption rates. Truck make model. Some trucks are more efficient with DEF usage based upon their emissions system design. And again, this is one of those things where you want to get a feel for what your typical DEF consumption is. And so if it suddenly jumps way up, it can tell you that you've got something going on. Listen to your truck once you get to know, what fuel economy can be a big indicator. A DEF consumption can be a big indicator. Does using DEF affect fuel economy? Interesting. DEF itself doesn't affect your truck's miles per gallon of diesel. In fact, because DEF allows the engine to run more efficiently with less EGR recirculation, some trucks actually get better fuel economy with the SCR and DEF system other than old models without them, which I know can be kind of a mind blower. So DEF consumption, about 2 to 5%, usually 2% of your diesel usage. So 2 gallons of DEF for every 100 gallons of diesel. Distance, maybe about 300 miles per gallon of DEF in most trucks. So, then the question is, should I buy it in the jug or buy it at the pump? I would say that even though the jugs are more expensive, the quality would be more consistent. You're not going to worry about getting DEF that might have water that's has seeped into the tank. But the DEF at the pump, as long as it's fresh and clean, is ideal because it's a lot cheaper. But DEF is DEF is DEF. So it doesn't matter whether you use Platinum DEF or regular DEF or Walmart DEF or what is the other, Tractor and Supply DEF or whatever it is. It's all the same. Just make sure you get it fresh and that there is no contamination in it. So if you're noticing unusually high DEF consumption, it could be a sign of some sort of emissions system issue. Give us a call or text 404-999-1361, and we can help you figure out your DEF issues. Again, call or text us anytime, 404-999-1361. We'd love to talk to you more about any problems you might be having with your emission system. All right, let's check to see if we got any more chats that came in here. Nothing there, which is good. Hopefully you're watching me and the Super Bowl at the same time. Well, this is an interesting one. In fact, hold on a second. I'm going to check and see. Oh, for Trump's sake, my 3D printer is not functioning properly. Hold on, I've got to interrupt my 3D print. Oh. Good night. 3D printing can be a pain in the butt. All right. Anyway, this is a good one. This is from Jorge Cervantes. He's got a 2016 Freightliner M2, and he deleted it. We tell you not to do that. When it's below 15 degrees and I hit 35, truck feels like it loses power and shakes violently. And when it gets above 35 degrees, it drives perfectly. Any ideas what's wrong with it? So here is an interesting situation. Now, even without emission system modifications, trucks can develop mechanical issues that cause symptoms like this, especially in cold weather. Some common culprits would include driveline issues, U-joints, drive shaft imbalance, worn carrier bearings can cause vibration at specific speeds. Cold weather can make existing issues worse because metal contracts, lubricants thicken, and leading to more noticeable shaking. Maybe you got a transmission issue, torque converter issues, worn clutches, could cause slipping and shuddering under certain conditions. And of course, in cold weather, frozen or thickened transmission fluid in extreme cold can cause delayed shifts, loss of power, and shuddering. Fuel system issues, maybe fuel gelling in cold weather can cause power loss. If you want to avoid fuel gelling, of course, we're kind of out of the thick of it when it comes to cold weather. But Clean Air Fleet, the Clean Air Fleet additive will definitely eliminate any gelling issues. Maybe engine mounts. Worn, broken engine mounts can cause vibrations to feel more intense in the cab, especially when the engine is under load. But last but not least, believe it or not, his deleted DPF might actually be causing this issue. And this is where it gets interesting. Deleting the DPF system doesn't just turn off emissions, it can affect the truck's entire performance. Why? Because on modern trucks like the Freightliner M2, the after treatment control module, or ACM, communicates with the engine control module, and the engine control module communicates with the transmission control module. So that's ACM, ECM, TCM. This network of control modules works together hand in hand to manage engine power, transmission, shifting, torque, delivery, and just diagnostics in general. When you delete your DPF system, you're not just removing emissions controls, you're altering data flow between all of these modules. Incorrect programming or missing data from a deleted system can cause the transmission control module to mismanage shift points, can affect torque converter lockup or throttle response. This can lead to power loss, shaking, rough shifting, and other drivability issues, especially under cold conditions where the system relies on more precise calibration. And why would this be worse in cold weather? Cold temperatures make weak mechanical parts more obvious because fluids thicken, metal contracts, and systems operate under different type of stress levels in the cold. Sensor feedback and control modules rely heavily on temperature compensation. If the delete software that you got when you got your truck deleted isn't properly calibrated, it can throw things out of sync when it's cold. So what should you do? Number one, rule out mechanical issues. So inspect your drivetrain, U-joints, carrier bearings, drive shaft balance, etc. Check your transmission fluid, ensure it's the correct type and not thickened from the cold. You may need to change it. Inspect fuel filters to ensure the fuel is not gelling. And rethink your delete. Have somebody qualified with access to the diagnostic software. Check for hidden faults in the ECM, TCM, the transmission control module, and ACM, even if you've deleted the emission system. Sometimes ghost codes or miscommunications between modules don't trigger a check engine light, but still cause drivability issues. Consider possibly reversing the delete or reprogramming the ECM properly. In many cases, the issues disappear when the truck software is restored to factory settings, but when you do that, it will erase your delete. So yes, this could just be a mechanical issue, but don't overlook the role of the delete. So if you can't find a mechanical issue, it's likely related to your delete. So modern trucks are complex, interconnecting systems, and deleting emissions can create unexpected side effects far beyond just emissions. I've seen deletes affect the air conditioning, the ABS, and all sorts of stuff. But if you or anybody out there has a question about a truck, deleted or not deleted, give us a call or text at 404-999-1361, and we can help you figure out if it's a mechanical issue, software issue, or both, or at least give you a good bit of advice on it. You deserve a truck that runs, whether it be at 10 below or 100 above. So let's get this baby sorted out. Give us a call, 404-999-1361. Call us anytime. All right, question number 6. All right, what do we got here? All right, come on, number 6. There we go. was having some touchscreen issues here. My truck is regenerating all the time. What can cause this? Hold on. My throat's getting dry. If your truck is going into a regen more frequently than it used to, that's a sign that something's causing excessive soot buildup in your system. And it could just be time, you know. Most trucks can go 2, 3, 400,000 miles between DPF cleanings. So if it's been a few 100,000 miles since you last got your DPF cleaned, you're probably just having an issue with just soot buildup that you need to get it clean. While a regen is a normal process, increased regen frequency usually points to an underlying issue that needs attention. So let's break this down as what the possible causes are and what you can do about it. One of them is excessive soot production. The most common reason is that your engine is producing more soot than normal. This can be caused by failing fuel injectors that are overfueling the engine, leading to incomplete combustion. EGR system problems like a stuck EGR valve or a clogged EGR cooler, which disrupts the fuel-air mixture. Low compression due to valve adjustment issues causing inefficient combustion. Something as simple as a dirty air filter restricting airflow and creating a rich fuel mixture that leads to more soot. A clogged or face-plugged DOC, diesel oxidation catalyst. So if the DOC is partially blocked, it prevents proper exhaust flow and heat transfer, making regens less effective. This causes the soot to build up faster, triggering regens more often. And then what happens is kind of a snowball because your DOC is not providing the heat you need to properly regen, and it gets worse and worse. Or possibly a seventh injector issue. On trucks with hydrocarbon dosers or seventh injectors, issues like carbon buildup, air system leaks, or a frozen airline in cold weather can cause incomplete fuel dosing during a regen, and the results in are partial regens, meaning the system isn't fully cleaning itself, so regens itself again soon after. Exhaust leaks, even teensy tiny small exhaust leaks, especially near the DOC or DPF, can affect pressure readings, making the ECM think the DPF is full, even when it's not, and trigger unnecessary regens. These exhaust leaks can also prevent the regen from happening properly because the heat is sneaking out through the exhaust leak instead of going downstream where it needs to be to burn the stuff off of the DPF. Could be a faulty sensor. Differential pressure sensors, temperature sensors that are malfunctioning can send incorrect data to the after treatment control module or the engine control module, ACM, ECM, causing frequent regen cycles. And even if a sensor isn't completely failed, a slight calibration issue can create problems. Or it just might be time to give us a call and get your DPF cleaned. Don't overlook the basics. Your DPF might simply be full, kind of like a vacuum cleaner bag on your vacuum cleaner being full, or a garbage can being full. The regeneration process is a temporary fix that burns off soot, but it doesn't clean out ash buildup that accumulates over time. When the DPF reaches its capacity for ash, regens become more frequent because there's less room for soot. And what do you need? A professional DPF cleaning will restore your filter's capacity for more junk and significantly reduce the frequency of regens. A properly done DPF cleaning, and I like to think we do it properly, will make that filter behave and perform as if it is brand new. So if you came to us and your truck had 397,000 miles on it before you got the DPF cleaned, question I normally get is, when do I have to come back? And the answer is, well, if you drive the truck the same way as you've been driving it, and if nothing goes weird in the engine, you should be able to come back in another 300 to 400,000 miles. So, because our goal is to get that DPF to be like new, and you should be able to get the same number of miles out of it. And so what happens if you ignore the issue, keep driving without addressing the root cause? Well, your DPF will eventually become clogged beyond what a regen can even handle. So you risk the engine to derate, or even a situation where the truck won't start. It won't even crank over because it's so plugged up. And of course, you can end up with a cracked DPF, a damaged DOC, or even an SCR contaminated with excessive soot from the cracked DPF. So what to do to fix it? Check for any active fault codes. Use a diagnostic tool like OTR Performance to pull any active codes. Even if the check engine light isn't on, there could be inactive or stored codes that could give us some clues. Inspect the key components. Check the air filter. If it's clogged, replace it with a new OEM filter. Inspect for exhaust leaks or on clamps, bellows. The bellows pipes coming down from the turbo are notorious for developing hairline cracks in them. And also check to see if there's any soot sneaking out from any of the DPF clamps right below your truck. If you have a one box, check to see if there's any soot coming out from the vents on the side of the one box that would indicate there's an exhaust leak inside. Verify your seventh injector is clean and functioning correctly. Get a professional DPF cleaning. Call us 404-999-1361 and say help, and we will help you. So if your truck is regenerating frequently, it's likely that your DPF is already partially clogged. A regen is just a temporary fix to restore proper function. The DPF needs a thorough cleaning to remove both soot and ash, and then it's ready to rock and roll. Another thing you can do to keep your DPF cleaner longer is to use Clean Air Fleet, the additive, and that'll reduce soot production and helps extend time not just between cleanings but also regeneration. Now, any sort of additive, Clean Air Fleet or anything else, will not unclog an already clogged DPF, but it's a great preventative measure and to keep you from having to see me as often. So frequent regens are a symptom, really not the problem. The real issue is usually excessive soot production, poor airflow, faulty sensors, or simply a DPF that's chock full of ash and soot that needs to be cleaned. Ignoring this will lead to bigger, more expensive repairs down the road. So if your truck keeps going into regen, call or text us 24 hours a day, 404-999-1361. Call or text us 24 hours a day. If you don't reach a human, you will talk to Lynn Diesel, our AI receptionist. She's actually standing by for your call right now, 404-999-1361. And we will make sure somebody is there to get to the root of the problem, saving you time, money, and hopefully a whole lot of frustration. All right. Number 7. Can a bad EGR cooler cause DPF problems? And yes, it absolutely can, especially if the EGR cooler is leaking coolant in the emission system or becoming clogged with soot. Cummins 6.7s that are in box trucks, and again, that's going to be a Freightliner M2, International 4300, Ford F750, the newer Hinos. Those things will plug up their EGR coolers pretty badly at about 250,000 miles, just so you know. The EGR cooler is a critical part of the emissions control system, and when it fails, it can create a domino effect, boom, 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 that leads to serious DPF issues. So let's kind of break down what all happens. Coolant, so an EGR goes bad, and an EGR is basically a heat exchanger where there's coolant flowing through pipes on the inside, and then the exhaust flows over those pipes. If it develops a crack, the coolant will then leak into the EGR cooler, into the exhaust stream, and then that goes downstream into the after treatment system, which means it'll hit the DOC, it'll hit the DPF, and maybe even get to the SCR. So the coolant gets carried through the diesel oxidation catalyst into the diesel particulate filter, and it might even make it into the SCR. And so the DOC is the kind of the magic piece of the system that produces that intense heat that you need to burn off the soot during a passive or active regen. And the DOC contains precious metals that are the catalytic metals that make it happen. Those precious metals are platinum, palladium, rhodium, and I like to say rhodium, curwip, and these are critical for the chemical reactions that produce the heat to reduce emissions. And what's interesting is the chemicals in coolant will dissolve the aluminum oxide, I think is what kind of holds those precious metals in place, and they will then wash or flush out of the DOC. And once the DOC has lost its precious metals to some level, the DPF has to work harder because more soot and unburned material make it downstream. Um, the Then what happens is when the so the coolant hits the DOC, the coolant can cause the precious metals to come loose from the DOC and go downstream, and guess what? They get stuck in the DPF. Um, and that can cause what's called a temperature inversion. So, um, and what it does then is where the precious metals were once in the DOC, they're now in the DPF, and now the DPF is actually producing the heat, not the DOC. Um, Also, the coolant that vaporizes in the exhaust doesn't just disappear. It can mix with the soot to form a thick, sticky sludge that clogs the DPF and makes a mess. That'll lead to face plugging or soot packing, or the front of the DPF becomes so blocked that the exhaust can't even flow through. But that's where it gets even more interesting when you talk about the temperature inversion in the after treatment system. So normally the hottest part of the after treatment system is the DOC outlet, and that's after the exhaust and that fine mist of diesel fuel coming from the seventh injector or coming from in cylinder dosing for engines that do that. Um, and that's the hottest part is going to be the outlet of that DOC, because that's where the magic happens. That's where the heat is created. And the DPF is usually a touch cooler because it's a few inches away, and it's downstream and it's primarily acting, doing its job. It's just nothing more than a soot trap. Um, However, when the DOC is damaged, like from coolant contamination, it loses its effectiveness and the DOC stops producing enough heat because it's no longer catalyzing doing the reactions like it used to, like it should. Meanwhile, however, the DPF starts to accumulating excessive soot. During regens, the DPF burns hotter than the DOC because it's got the precious metals in it, and that's called a temperature inversion. When you do call us with these issues at 404 999 1361, and if you're really stuck, and we'll talk to your mechanic, and one of the biggest things we'll look for is there are 3 temperature sensors that we care about in the situation. One of them is going to be the what is the exhaust temperature going into the system? What's the DOC inlet temperature? And then what's the exhaust temperature coming out of the DOC? That's either going to be called a DOC outlet or a DPF inlet. It just depends where the temperature probe is. If the probe is in front of, it's actually attached to the DOC, that's considered a DOC outlet. If it's a few inches away, attached to the DPF, it's called the DPF inlet. They both measure the same thing. And then the temperature for the DPF outlet. Those are really, even though there's a million things you can check, those are only 3 things that matter. So if the DPF outlet ends up hotter than the DOC outlet, which is the opposite of how the system should work, hence temperature inversion, the DPF basically starts acting like a DOC because of all the catalytic metals in it, and it's not, the DOC is not doing its job. The DPF is producing heat where it doesn't need heat, and it can crack the DPF. And so aside from coolant leaks, another major issue is when an EGR cooler becomes completely packed with soot. And we can clean EGR coolers. If you have an EGR cooler that needs to be cleaned, call or text us at 404 999 1361. But sometimes the EGR cooler will literally get packed with so much soot we can't even get it out. Over time, that soot builds up and can clog the EGR cooler's internal passages, restricting or completely blocking exhaust flow. This causes poor EGR system performance, leading to increased exhaust back pressure, higher combustion temperatures, and excessive soot production, which overwhelms the DPF. So then the question is, can it be fixed? In many cases, some of these issues can be resolved with the complete EGR cooling or cleaning, EGR cooler cleaning. So how do we do it? We use a powerful ultrasonic machine and high flow flushing to break down and remove stubborn carbon deposits. However, if the soot level is extremely severe, even our cleaning process might not restore proper flow, and the cooler might need to be replaced entirely. Signs your EGR cooler might be failing: frequent regens, believe it or not, more regens than usual because the soot is filling up faster. White smoke from the exhaust, and this is a big telltale sign. Like I said in a couple questions ago, you should not see or smell anything coming out of your exhaust. White smoke would indicate steam, and that's coolant burning off in the exhaust. Loss of coolant with no visible leaks. If you're constantly topping off your coolant, but there's no puddle under the truck, it might be leaking into the exhaust. Check engine lights with EGR, DPF codes. Codes related to the EGR performance, NOx efficiency, or DPF differential pressure could point to an underlying EGR cooler issue. Strange temperature readings can be another one. Rough idling, loss of power. A completely soot-packed EGR cooler can restrict airflow, causing poor engine performance. And what happens if you ignore it? DPF failure. DPF eventually becomes so clogged that it can't be cleaned, requiring a replacement. And again, we can clean just about anything, but if it becomes cracked, you gotta, you have to replace it. Damage to your SCR. The coolant contamination can also reach your SCR, causing permanent damage. Potential turbo damage. Severe cases, coolant can even back up towards the turbo, causing corrosion and failure. A EGR cooler rupture, which is not highly likely. They're pretty tough, but a soot-packed EGR cooler under pressure can crack and rupture, and that can lead to all sorts of badness. And so first of all, you want to confirm that your EGR cooler is the issue. We do pressure testing of the EGR cooling system to identify any leaks. Check for signs of any coolant in the exhaust, which is going to be, the white steam or anything like that. Perform an EGR flow test to detect blockages from soot. And then, clean the EGR cooler or replace it if it's that bad. If it's leaking, you got to replace it. If it's clogged only with soot, try having us clean it. But be prepared to replace it if cleaning doesn't restore proper flow. This is especially true on the trucks with the Cummins 6.7. The other ones, we rarely have any EGR cooler we can't clean, but the 6.7s will develop just a chunk of basically it's like coal right in the middle and nothing gets it out of there. And if you are leaking coolant, the DPF will need a thorough cleaning to remove the coolant. Our process does do that, by the way. The DOC should be inspected to ensure it hasn't lost any catalytic efficiency, and that can be done by watching the temperatures on a regen. If the SCR has been contaminated, it may also need a cleaning or a replacement. Usually cleaning will take care of that. The coolant does not hurt the SCR. A bad EGR cooler can absolutely cause DPF issues, whether it's leaking coolant into the exhaust or is jammed up with soot. And cooling contamination just doesn't burn off. It destroys key components like the DOC, clogs the DPF, and even causes dangerous temperature inversions over time. Soot packing can choke off exhaust flow, leading to poor engine performance, excessive regens, and costly repairs. So what should you do? Call us, text us. Do it right now if you want. 404-999-1361. 404-999-1361. And let's see if we can help you diagnose the problem, get your truck back on the road running clean, smooth, and strong like bull. All right. A quick check here. Hey, okay, cool. That's right. We got one here. So bad time for live, same time as the Super Bowl, but dropping in and say hello. So anybody who is watching this, either out of one eye while they watch the Super Bowl, who's winning, Eagles or wherever, and how are the commercials? Thank you for watching. Now this live will be recorded, so you can come back after the Super Bowl and check it out. But thank you so much for the comment, much appreciated. And this is going to make me blush. From Cliff Schill, saying this guy knows his stuff, solved my DPF issue. That is fantastic. Thank you for the testimony there. Much appreciated, Cliff. I'm so glad that we got you going. And tell your friends. Because if there's anybody we can help, we will help. All right, let's go back to question number 8. How does cold weather affect DPF regeneration? And what can I do to prevent issues during winter? Cold weather, really cold weather can really mess with, diesel gets thick and, it can be hard on your truck. Now, are you talking about Georgia cold? Or are you talking about Alaska cold or Wisconsin cold? But, all of those are a little bit different, but cold weather can really mess with your DPF system. And it's one of the most common reasons we see trucks struggling with regen issues this time of year, meaning, well, maybe not this time because it's starting to warm up a little bit. The good news is once you understand what's happening, there are a lot you can do to prevent problems. So why would cold weather cause DPF problems? Hold on a second. And my nose always runs while I'm doing these. My wife is too good to me. Lower exhaust temperatures. If your DPF has already been kind of, if things are running a little colder than they should to start with, the cold weather is not going to help. So your DPF needs heat to properly function, usually around 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, 600 degrees Celsius to burn off soot during a regen. In cold weather, it's harder for your engine to maintain these temperatures, especially if you're idling or driving short distances. So if you're up on the highway and everything's, you're cruising along at 60, 70 miles per hour and everything has a chance to get hot. But if you're only driving the truck a few miles or driving local and stop and start, you might have a challenge getting things hot enough to actually burn off the soot. So that'll lead to incomplete regens. Well, the soot isn't, that's where the soot's not fully burned off and causing buildup over time. Frozen or leaking air lines, which affects the seventh injector. Many trucks rely on the seventh injector, the hydrocarbon doser, to inject fuel into the exhaust system during a regen. On trucks where the seventh injector is powered by compressed air, frozen or leaking air lines can cause it to malfunction. So no fuel injection equals no regen, and you won't, you'll have DPF issues. Frozen DEF. This isn't a problem. DEF can freeze, and there's a heater in the DEF tank, but it does freeze at 12 degrees Fahrenheit, -11°C. So it freezes at a lower temperature in the water, but it will still freeze if you get down to below 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Now this will definitely be a problem in Wisconsin and Minnesota, etc. So while modern trucks have heaters in the DEF tanks, the lines, the injector, these heaters can fail or just take longer to thaw in extreme cold. If the DEF system can't function properly, your truck may derate or refuse to start a regen. Another thing is, what if your fan clutch is stuck on? A stuck fan clutch can cause your engine to run cooler than normal, especially in colder weather. This keeps exhaust temperatures too low for a regen to be effective. Now, let me talk about the fan clutch for a second here. A properly functioning cooling fan is incredibly important to your engine. If your cooling fan doesn't come on, guess what happens? Your engine will overheat, will cause serious damage. So the fan clutches are designed to be fail safe, which means that if the fan clutch will fail, it should fail in a manner that will keep your fan running. Because while that might be a nuisance, it might require repair at some point, at least you're not going to blow up your engine or overheat your engine, right? So you need to have your fan clutch cycle on and off so that the engine can get hot enough to actually to produce the necessary exhaust temperatures to regenerate your engine. I've seen that where a fan clutch will be stuck on and it will never get hot enough to do a regen. So pay attention to that. Exhaust leaks, tiny leaks, teensy tiny little hairline cracks in the exhaust system, especially up by the turbo, can allow cold air to enter and disrupt pressure or let, not so much cold air to enter, but let the heat escape and disrupt both your temperature and pressure readings. Even a hairline crack in the bellows pipe down from the turbo can throw off your regen process. And just look for any sort of exhaust leaks. So what are some tips to prevent cold weather DPF issues? Keep your engine hot when you can. Avoid excessive idling. Idling keeps the engine running, but it doesn't produce enough heat for a regen. If you're idling for long periods, try to periodically rev the engine to increase exhaust temps. Now, the truck should be smart enough to go into passive regen, but sometimes it just can't keep up. Drive at highway speeds whenever possible. This higher load maintains exhaust temps needed for the regen. Check your air system. Make sure your air dryer is working properly to prevent moisture from freezing in the lines. And of course, that will also prevent other issues that involve your air. Drain your air tanks regularly to remove water before it has a chance to freeze. And if your truck uses compressed air for the seventh injector, inspect for leaks. Even a small one can cause regen failure. Keep your DEF system healthy. Top off your DEF tank to reduce the chances of freezing. as a full tank retains heat a little bit better. Verify your DEF heaters are working. If they're not, you'll run into issues as soon as temperatures drop to 12 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit or colder. Use high quality DEF to avoid contamination that could freeze and clog the lines. So if you actually had DEF that had too much water in it, should only have 67.5% water. It's going to freeze at a higher temperature and will freeze on you sooner than uh, that DEF that's properly formulated. Now that's not going to happen unless something contaminates the DEF, like water, but it's a good thing to know. Look for loose clamps, damaged gaskets, and small cracks in exhaust pipes, especially around the DOC and DPF. Even small leaks can create problems in cold weather because they let hot air escape, reducing temperature and cause a little problem that way. What else can you do? Shameless plug. Use Clean Air Fleet diesel additive. This additive improves combustion efficiency, meaning less soot produced in the first place, reducing the strain on the DPF system, especially in winter. It also demulsifies water in your fuel, which gets that water out of the fuel because water doesn't burn. It just causes it causes problems in your injectors, your fuel pump, and everything else. Clean Air Fleet will also prevent fuel gelling, which is super good to have in the winter, especially if you fuel up in a warm weather climate and then head north. If you're up in the northern climates already, your diesel's probably already winterized with anti-gel. But if you fill up in, let's say, Tennessee and then drive up to Minnesota, you're driving up there with non-winterized diesel that will gel up on you if you let it sit in the cold. If you're having problems already, check for fault codes. Don't ignore the warning lights. If your truck is struggling to regen or going into D-rate, it might be time simply for a DPF cleaning. I know a guy. Always remember, a regen is just a temporary fix. A DPF cleaning restores the system to full capacity, clearing out both soot and ash, and regens will eventually stop you and take care of that. So cold weather does make it harder for your truck to complete regens because lower exhaust temps and stresses key components like the DEF system and the 7th injector. Prevent issues by keeping your engine hot, maintaining your air and DEF systems, and inspecting for exhaust leaks. Problems persist or you've got any questions, don't wait till you're stuck. Call or text us at 404-999-1361. We'll help you get back in the road no matter how cold it gets. Believe me, I'm from Wisconsin. I know cold. Call or text us 404-999-1361. Somebody will definitely help you out. Okay, number 9, can a clogged crankcase breather cause DPF issues? Yes, in fact, we just saw this on a truck last week. So yes, absolutely, a clogged crankcase breather can cause all sorts of issues with your emission system, including DPF issues. It's one of those maintenance items that's easy to overlook, but it plays a big role in keeping your engine running and running clean. So a crankcase breather is also known as a CCV, a crankcase ventilation filter, a CCV filter, crankcase ventilation filter, and it's part of your engine's emission system, believe it or not. Its job is to vent excess pressure from the crankcase, which builds up as your engine runs. It'll filter the oil mist out of and other contaminants before they're sent back in the intake system to be burned off during combustion. So think of it as the engine's version of a PCV valve on a car. It's there to control internal pressures and keep the engine from turning into a giant oil fog machine. And again, I've got a video of this on my TikTok. What happened is his CCV filter was so plugged up that when his engine was running, you'd take the cap off of the oil filter or the oil filler, and it was literally blowing smoke out of the crankcase, out of the oil filler, and so he needed to get that taken care of. So how does this cause the problem? So the crankcase breather gets clogged. It can't properly vent pressure, leads to a chain reaction of issues. The oil mist enters the intake system. Clogged breather forces oil vapor and mist back into the intake at higher levels than normal. This oil doesn't burn cleanly, creating a thick soot which flows directly into the exhaust system. Increased soot production that clogs the DPF faster than usual. Also can cause higher exhaust temperatures, not always, but sometimes. Burning oil in the combustion chamber leads to hotter exhaust gases. This can lead to thermal stress in the DPF or thermal shocking, increasing the risk of cracks in the filter substrate. And once your DPF is cracked, the soot flows into other parts of the system, causing downstream failures. Can also plug up the face of the DPF or soot packet. Um, so oil mist can cause a goopy, sticky deposit in the DPF, leading to face plugging, where the front of the filter becomes so clogged that the exhaust can't even flow through, becomes more of a cork. Unlike normal soot, this oil-based residue is harder to burn off during regen, making the problem get worse and worse over time. If oil gets past the DPF, it can contaminate the SCR, damaging the catalyst and reducing NOx conversion efficiency. It can poison the SCR as well. This could lead to DEF efficiency codes and expensive repairs. So what do you need to look for to see if you've got a clogged crankcase breather? Excessive soot production, more frequent regens or DPF clogging sooner than expected. Oil leaks around the engine. High crankcase pressure can force oil past gaskets and seals. Blue smoke from the exhaust indicates oil is being burned in the combustion process. Now, it also indicates that that blue smoke is getting past the DPF, which tells me that the DPF itself is cracked. I would also tell people, if you're having emissions issues, whether it's caused by the CCV filter or something else, always check your tailpipe or your stack. That should just be squeaky clean, maybe with just a light dusting of kind of a white powder, which is a leftover residue from the DEF, builds up very slowly over time. If you wipe your finger in your tailpipe and take it out and there's black soot on it, that's telling you that your DPF is cracked. So, be aware of that as well. Check engine lights. You may see codes relating to EGR flow issues, DPF efficiency, or even turbo performance. Whistling noises, maybe, not every truck, but clogged breather can cause high-pitched whistling from the pressure buildup. Again, whistling that you never heard from before. And I'm trying to think of what else. DPF efficiency. I mentioned that. You might get a DPF efficiency code. What a DPF efficiency code on any truck that would be like 2017 and later, that means that they have a soot or particulate matter sensor, a soot sensor, or a PM sensor. They both do the same thing at the very tail end. And if it starts to sense soot, that means that your DPF is not being efficient, meaning your DPF is not capturing the soot, meaning it's cracked, and the soot is sneaking through and being smelled by the soot sensor. And you can also do the same thing by swiping a finger in a tailpipe. If you see soot, that means soot's getting through. So how to prevent it? Regularly replace the crankcase breather filter as part of your maintenance program. And most manufacturers recommend replacing the crankcase breather filter every 150,000 to 250,000 miles, which is about the same interval for DPF cleaning. So maybe when you get your DPF cleaned, you should replace your crankcase filter. But of course, this can vary based upon your engine. If you're in a dusty or harsh environment, I would say replace it more often. Inspect for oil leaks. If you see excessive oil inside the intercooler pipes or turbo inlet, check the breather system. That's really a red flag. Get your DPF cleaned when it needs to get cleaned. Even with a healthy crankcase, soot will eventually build up in your DPF. And don't rely on regens alone. Get your DPF professionally cleaned to prevent long-term damage. And use Clean Air Fleet additive. Text or call 404-999-1361 to learn more about Clean Air Fleet. That additive will improve combustion efficiency, which will reduce soot production at the source, making the entire emission system, including the DPF, work more efficiently. Clogged crankcase breather doesn't just affect the engine, it can cause serious DPF issues by increasing soot production and contaminating the aftertreatment system. Regular maintenance of the breather filter is simple and inexpensive, but it can save you thousands in emissions related and other repairs down the road. So if you're dealing with frequent regens, excessive soot, or DPF codes, don't overlook the crankcase breather as a potential culprit. Call or text us anytime, day or night, 404-999-1361, 404-999-1361. If you're experiencing any of these issues or anything else, and I'll do my best to get you to the bottom of it and keep your truck running clean and strong no matter where you are. All right. Last but not least, question number 10. Oh, man, this is a good one. What's the difference between ash and soot in a DPF? And why does it matter for cleaning? So that's a great question because a lot of people think that as long as their truck is doing regens, um, the DPF is staying clean. But that's not the whole story. There's a big difference between soot and ash, and understanding the difference is key to keeping your after treatment healthy and staying out of the shop. So, what is soot? Well, kind of goes without saying. Soot is black, powdery, made up of tiny carbon particles, as well as um, the unburned hydrocarbon, unburned diesel fuel. So it's not just carbon; it's actually it literally is unburned. It's like powdered diesel. Um, it's like ground up coal. And where does the soot come from? Um, Forms naturally in all diesel engines. Things like poor combustion, bad injectors, excessive idling, or dirty air filters can simply make it worse. Um, but once the soot's in the DPF, what happens? The DPF, diesel particulate filter, is designed to trap this soot in the honeycomb-like structures. And during a regen, which is again shorthand for regeneration, the system heats up to burn off the trapped soot, turning it into harmless gases like carbon dioxide and vapor. But anytime you burn up the soot, there's also a small amount of ash left over. And the ash is also caused by the normal and acceptable burning of engine oil. There are metals in the engine oil, and you burn a tiny bit of it every time you combust the diesel. Um, the engine oil will kind of will fall down between the rings and the cylinder walls to lubricate it, and a small amount of it will eventually burn. Um, and and produce ash in the DPF. So what is this ash? It's left behind after the soot burns off. And think about it like ash in a fireplace after you burn wood. It's made up of tiny metal particles of things from engine oil additives, fuel additives, trace metals from engine wear, and guess what? Ash does not burn off during the regen. It's non-combustible, which means it just sits there in the DPF, slowly building up over time. Again, same thing with your fireplace. You will, you can burn, log after log after log, and it burns down, but there's always ash left over. And eventually you got to get in there and sweep that ash out. And it's the same thing with your DPF. Um, so regens keep soot under control, but it does nothing to remove the ash. So ash will keep accumulating every time soot is burned off a little bit. Again, it's not a lot, it's a tiny amount. Over time, the DPF's honeycomb structure becomes clogged with ash, restricting exhaust flow, which leads to higher back pressure, reduced engine performance, poor fuel economy, and eventually will derate or put you in limp mode. And you might think my truck regens just fine. And sure, regens handle soot, but the ash is still piling up, slowly choking your DPF. What are the signs that your DPF is full of ash? Frequent regens. Your truck keeps trying to clean the DPF because it senses restricted flow. And even though the soot is gone, the ash is still there. Loss of power, increased back pressure makes the engine work harder. Poor fuel economy. The engine burns more fuel to compensate for restricted airflow. DPF warning lights. Your truck's computer detects high differential pressures across the DPF, indicating that it's not breathing as well, which indicates that it's, there's something that something restricting the exhaust flow. It could be just your gut, no codes, but something feels off. This is common because ash buildup doesn't always trigger a code right away because the ash is semi-breathable. It won't plug you up completely. And the regen simply will not remove the ash from your DPF, period. Nor will any sort of DPF cleaning solution that you dump somewhere, including, some people do chemical cleaning in the DPF, and they put chemicals in the exhaust and they say it magically cleans it out. It does not. The only way to remove ash is through professional DPF cleaning. At DPF Guys, we use a multi-step cleaning process, starting from high pressure air blast and vacuum to dislodge the loose stuff. And then we do an aqueous flush where we use a high volume of just pure water, and at a low-ish pressure, about 120 psi, and that will chase all of the real stubborn stuff out. And then it goes into a regeneration bake where we bake it at regen temperatures for about 8 hours. And once that's done, it goes back into the airflow machine, and we blow out whatever material might have baked out in the oven. It's not very little in there usually. And of course, we do full testing before and after to test the airflow to make sure that we're getting the flow rates that we want to see. A flow rate that will be at or near what the flow rate would be if it was brand new. And then also we give you a weight before and after to see how much junk was in the system. This entire process will restore your DPF's capacity, and once it's back together, your engine performance will be noticeably better, almost all the time. So the question people ask is, how often should you get the DPF professionally cleaned? And the answer is, it depends how your truck is driven, what type of truck it is. Some people will say get it done every year. Some people say get it done every 150,000 miles. You certainly can. There's no harm in that. But it's probably a little too often. I would always tell people to think about it at about 200,000 miles. 200,000 to 300,000 miles is a good round number for DPF cleaning. Some trucks like Max and Volvos can go a lot longer. I've seen them come in at 800,000 to 900,000 miles between cleanings. If you use an additive, again, like Clean Air Fleet, I'll wait for it to spin around so you can see the label, Clean Air Fleet, 404-999-1361 if you want to get your 10% discount. An additive like Clean Air Fleet can extend the times between cleaning quite a bit. But soot is the stuff that a regen burns off, and what's left over is called ash. And it builds up over time and cannot be burned off, just like you cannot magically burn off the ash in your fireplace or your Weber grill. You just have to clean it out. And the regens do handle soot, but only a cleaning can get rid of the ash. Ignoring that ash buildup can lead to engine damage, costly repairs, and unexpected and also costly downtime. If you're not sure whether your DPF needs cleaning, call or text us at 404-999-1361. We offer free inspections and can tell you exactly what your truck needs to stay on the road and making money. Again, anytime, 404-999-1361. If you were to call us right now, you would actually talk to Lynn Diesel, our AI receptionist, and she gets smarter every day. Let me quick check, see if anything else came in. Oh, Eagle 17-0. Holy Nikes. Well, there's your Super Bowl score, 17-0. See if that comes around. All right, I'm gonna run this across the bottom here. If you do text the word additive to 404-999-1361, text additive to 404-999-1361 to get your 10% discount on your first case. And I just want to say thank you all for watching. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments below or text us directly at 404-999-1361. 404-999-1361, or just call us and talk to Lynn Diesel and say, hey, Lynn, I was watching the live. Here's my phone number. This is my question, and somebody will get back to you later or tomorrow with your answers. I'll be back next week to answer more of your questions. Make sure you subscribe to the DPF Guys YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, and find us on TikTok. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next week.
Haze, just clear skies ahead with DPF Guys. Your exhaust game's on tread. We got the tools, the skills, the might to get your truck rolling clean into the night. Throttle up, feel that clean airflow. Our service so slick, your ride seals the show. DPF Guys, we got the fit so fine. Hit the road with confidence. Now the world's your shrine. Bring in that rig, let's get on track. Breathe it easy with no sooty black.